Hi, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk, the podcast here at the Courier. I'm David. I am the host for now. I'm still looking for a co-host. I'm sorry. I still have no idea who's going to fill in that spot, but we'll see if someone will come to light. But this is episode 3 of season 3, actually, so 3-3. And today, since we're kind of in between episodes right now, we're getting ready for a really big episode next week, so that should be very exciting. But today I am joined by the news editor.
Assistant news editor.
You could introduce yourself.
I'm Sabrina, assistant news editor and co-video social media editor.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that title.
Yeah, I've got 2 titles.
Yeah.
But I'll never be news editor because Seamus is king. So don't forget it.
Seamus will still be the news editor after he's gone. He's gonna haunt these halls. So today we're gonna be talking about separating the art against the artist, which you actually brought this topic to me. So could you just kind of like talk about like why this topic exactly and why you wanted to talk about it now as opposed to like, I don't know, like in the future or before?
So, it's a very, I guess every time says this about themselves, but it's a very interesting, heated time we're living in. I think a lot of people want to accuse our generation of being very puritanical about certain values, be it moral or political or whatever. And so like, you know, the whole like I don't want to get canceled thing is very common today. And the way I understand it is that cancel culture is not exactly a new phenomenon, but I've only ever been alive in this generation. I can just say it seems like it's taken on a new form.
Yeah, as far as, especially like in like with the internet, I think that's the reason why cancel culture is the way it is, as opposed to like, I think we're talking about this before, but like McCarthy, like that's kind of like the equivalent of what cancel culture is, except, you know, it's influencing your job in politics as opposed to your time on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, I guess with like separating the art with the artist, you get that term thrown around so often to the point where it's like it's used for the most middling of like issues some people have with artists, but at the same time you have it, you hear it at least with music and novels and like even like just like old art, where whether it could be something like as little as, I don't know, the way an African American was drawn in the corner of like a Reconstruction era painting, you know, like examples like that are just like where the term you're starting to see the term more and more, and to the point where I think it's so commonplace that like people really just, you know, like applying it to old and new artists, which I think is like a really important distinction of it's not just going retroactively and be like, oh well, this person is outdated and this song is not for our time, but now it's like, no, you're not of our time, you need to get out of here, here's the pitchforks, here's the torches. So I guess like to start things off, you said that you had gotten into an argument about separating the art versus artists. So.
I don't want to get into it, but I know that that's a very it's a very big argument. I have it a lot. You bring up a really good point about like us like being in the present time and being like, you're not of our time because you're spouting these words and ideas with your work. I just find that really interesting because it's safe to say, I mean, okay, as a history major, part of like the work of a historian is to be a bit of a revisionist, right? Because as our attitudes change with every generation, then things in the past have a new meaning to us. And that doesn't mean changing facts, but it's just more like changing how things are framed and making more space for more marginalized voices. And so part of that argument that I mentioned was kind of having to contend with that and recognize that maybe a lot of the artists and writers or whatever that we've glamorized for so long are maybe not the best, or are imperfect, just like human beings are. And part of our critique should include the political things and like who the artist is, because none of that is removed from history.
I mean, just kind of like going off of like what you were saying, I mean, and you kind of mentioned you're a history major, it's to the point where I think people are trying to like write the history book as it's already being written. I mean, obviously people write history books all the time and they're always updated, but in the sense of like, we're already making the rules to what's accepted and what's not accepted now, as opposed to letting it sit and letting it kind of age naturally, and basically just like accelerating the process of how we experience things or how we view things looking back. So it's such a weird like just way of looking at things, because like it's not like I also like mentioned this right before, which we had a pretty long conversation, like not long but like wide ranging about this, and like I brought the example of like I don't know if like anyone was like out in like the in public just saying like, hey, like this new Faulkner novel, like there's too many N-words used, like I don't know if anyone was doing that, but like now like you have, I mean, just hearing you describe it, like maybe it's too obvious of an example, but I just think of like Kanye, like, which is just the most like I see that term so thrown, like especially with his fans, it's like, oh, you need to separate the art from the artist. He still makes good music, he still is like having #1 hits, and it's like, well, I don't know about that. So maybe I think a good point to kind of go now is like, where do you fall? Like, do you think you should separate the art from the artist, or is there a line where it's like, no, there's no way you can?
That's a great point, because the same person I was arguing with made a great point about how, like, for example, like Dan Schneider, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know if you can consider him an artist, but he's like a creator, right? Yeah. And it seems like since the that documentary series came out, like a lot of his predation is evident in the work. Yeah. And in that case, it's like you can't separate maybe the art from the artist. Compared to someone like Michael Jackson, where like I can't really think of his like actions being in his work. Mm-hmm. But also I think that it's important to recognize like what that term is supposed to mean, like to separate the art from the artist. Is it absolute, or is it more of like an attitude? Because like maybe we separate the art from the artist to enjoy certain parts of the art, because not everybody is perfect. Yeah. And but then also we do keep the artist as part of the art, because the artist did make the art, and it wouldn't even be art if the artist didn't call it art. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, I think you really like hit it where is it an absolute or is it an attitude? Because I think you really when you see someone saying like, oh, you need to separate the art from the artist, it's more of like them justifying why they enjoy the art in the first place. So it's not like they're trying to look at it from like an art analysis point of view, where it's like, no, we have to consider the art as it is and not bring in examples of like, I don't know, like the writer of or maybe not the right, like Virginia Woolf, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you just enjoy To the Lighthouse for what it is, or analyze To the Lighthouse for what it is, instead of like bringing in her like anti-Semitism, which for some reason was like consistent of like all 20th century authors. They just really liked their anti-Semitism. But so I think I only ever see it as like an attitude, at least on like social media and like online. Yeah. I think that's when, and I mean, social media is just like a cesspool just for anything, but especially for like art analysis. But like, I think they throw that term around really just to like justify their own either guilt or just, you know, so they could get people to not yell at them over it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, especially with Kanye, I always see it. But
yeah,
he's a living man. Like, he's still alive. It's not like he's dead. Where I wanted to kind of like focus is more on people who aren't with us anymore, and yet you still have people trying to like make, you know, pay for their actions, or at least like justify why they're enjoying the art when there's so many things coming to light about them, or things that are already in light and then people just choose to ignore. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm sure like you or me or anyone, like, we at least listen to people or we read people who either said things in the past that were hurtful or things that are outdated. So I guess, like, where do you think is the line with people who are no longer here, if there is one? Or is it more just like, well, you're not supporting them, because how could you support them if they're 6 feet below?
Great point. So I guess like when they're not with us, they can't respond to like things being said about them, right?
Yeah.
And I think people that religiously defend problematic writers or artists of the past, it's really like themselves trying to because like those people that are defending those dead artists are they probably don't want to uphold white supremacy, and they're afraid that by like liking this art they might be upholding white supremacy too, and so it's one of those things where it's understandable, but it's important to come to terms with what makes your idols imperfect, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's useful to try to like say that separate the art from the artist. I think it's more useful as a critic to be like, yeah, Virginia Woolf was anti-Semitic, we can see it here in the writing, but then also in this same work we can get these beautiful ideas or whatever, like we can get it's possible for some people to remove themselves, or they're like remove certain parts of the art, or just like squirm a little while they're reading it, and just that's a way of like engaging with history and art. As for modern examples, Kanye, to go back to that because that's a great example.
Kanye.
Yes, Kanye. Oh, Kanye.
Yeah, but you're saying.
Yeah, so his older work, I mean, this becomes another thing, because for me personally, I like his older work better because I liked his politics better. You know, that was like Bush hates black people era compared to MAGA Kanye, right? So, and so that's my personal opinion. And you can hear his opinions, and then also just like the way he's treating certain people in his life in his lyrics. He's very open about that. And I don't listen to a lot of his most recent work, maybe like after Pablo. But so maybe you could speak on it better. But I don't know. It's an interesting story. He's an interesting case study, you know. But like in terms of supporting him, I have no idea. I have no idea, because I don't know. Can you just say something else? Or like please say something on that. Yeah,
I mean, well, I don't listen to him anymore. I think once it got to the point of, you know, I remember seeing a tweet long time ago where I think it was in 2018. Some guy's like, "You guys need to get off the Kanye train before he starts saying Hitler was right." And then sure enough, he said Hitler was right. But that's actually interesting. I never thought of that. Of like, is it fair to, you know, listen to an artist's work before they, quote unquote, became problematic? Or is it just nothing is fair, like you just need to ignore the art because it is so harmful, and supporting him is just, whatever? Which I honestly think, like, if you stream his songs, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not like he's even making money off of like you streaming, I don't know, like the College Dropout like 2 times in a row. Like, he's not gonna get anything from that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I don't claim to have like an answer, especially for Kanye, and I don't want to talk too much about Kanye, because I mean, like, what can we say that hasn't already been said about Kanye, or that he hasn't even said about himself? But I guess, like, with him, it's so frustrating because you clearly see that he was at least he had different views back then. Like, there's that old photo of him, I think in like elementary or high school, where he's like, no Nazis, and it's like a cancel symbol over it, and it's like, how did you go from that to like, no, like Hitler was right? So, but if we're using that like thing of, okay, well, the old art is okay, but anything they make after that is not okay, then how do you make the distinction with someone from the past where like, for example, I don't know, like, just to throw another musician like John Lennon, right? Like, just the whole history of him abusing I think it was his first wife. Like, do you just not consider anything that the Beatles made in like just in totality at all, or is it okay to listen to the Beatles, just not any of like John Lennon's solo work? And so I think with that, it's really like at your own discretion, I feel, with something like this, where and like, I'm like kind of rambling now, but like, as we all ramble, but with like separating the art from the artist, what it just means is you're not considering the artist when you're enjoying the art. That's all it's really saying. It's not saying you cannot enjoy the art now that the artist is problematic. It's just saying, look, you observe the art for what it is, and then you don't even consider what the artist is, which, I think there's levels to it where, like, if someone says something problematic, like, honestly, it's freedom of speech. They could say that if they wanted to. Maybe it's not nice for them to say that, but it's nothing. It's not as serious of an issue unless it's leading to like real world harm. Then that's like, okay, like, slow it down. But yeah, I don't know. I guess, like, for you, like, do you think it's something of, or do you think it's a matter of like there's levels to it, or do you think it's just like, no, like, just separate art from artists, or don't separate it? I don't know.
I think that there's levels to it. I think that, like, if you go to a museum or like a gallery and you see an art piece, then you just see the art. Maybe you don't know who the artist is. You don't know what they're trying to say. All of that is like something you find out later through like research, and we have the internet now, so that even makes our engagement with art different, like you said earlier. But like, usually when you are confronted with art, you're just taking in the art and that's and how it makes you feel or what it makes you think about. And sometimes the art is more open about what it's trying to say politically, and that has something to do with who the artist is, but sometimes not. And so I would say that for me personally, when I engage with art, I take in how it makes me feel, what it makes me think about, and then when I know who the artist is or what the intent was, or if it's evident in the work that there's something quote problematic about it, that's just part of the art to me. It's like, kind of like, it says something about the world, and the artist, once I know who they are, I can't remove them from the piece, but I can still engage with it and still get something out of it. And unless it's just like a Nazi sign that says like kill, then, and it's like inciting violence, and I wouldn't even like that art. I wouldn't even consider it art. But then that leans more into art being What? I'm going off on like a rambling tangent.
That's actually like interesting though, because like, yeah, it is the actual, like, what people are taking offense to, is it in the actual art, or is it just them associating the art with the artist and they just can't separate themselves from it? So like, I guess like for me, like if you could clearly see that there are signs of what that artist is like believing, or like what their problematic views are in that art, and you're like, you know, just ignoring it and refusing to acknowledge its existence, then I think that's where it's like, okay, well, you can't separate the art from the artist because it's in the art. And if you're enjoying the art and actively defending it, then you're just being complicit in what the, you know, what the artist is like. I mean, I don't want to say preaching, but it you know, what
perpetuating.
Yeah, what they're perpetuating. Yeah, that's the word. So I think you see that with more like fans of a person's work, and it kind of goes back to how we opened this up about, you only ever see separating the art from the artist as like a defense attitude, where it's like, I'm trying to defend myself from people who are trying to cancel me. Like I don't know how many times I've heard like a friend or just like even someone saying like, no, I just don't want to be canceled. Like, they just don't want the trouble. But it's like, okay, well, then you're associating yourself with trouble at the same time. So you know, you have to, if you're gonna listen to Kanye, but still acknowledge what he's saying and like know the context of what it is that he's saying. And it goes for anything. I think even with like something like, I don't know, John Lennon, or reading a Virginia Woolf book, or reading a Faulkner novel, like it just, it goes on and on with just history in general. And you know, look like close enough and you're gonna find something you don't like about like anyone or the artist, you know. But it's just a matter of like, you know, how much of it is public, how much of it is known, and how much of it is actually in the art. So I guess to go off of that, like, do you think there's just, and this is too like far away from like what the topic is, but do you think there's justification in canceling art and kind of censoring art? I mean, I think that's like a big, you know, there's a lot of like blurry lines when you get into that, but I don't know, at least for me, like I see something of, you know, people praising The Birth of a Nation, that old 1915 movie, which sure, it's like technically innovative, but like it also led to like the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. Like I don't know about that. So like, do you think there is value in censoring art, or do you think it should just be a matter of, no, make it accessible but still give it the right context it needs?
I mean, that's a great question, because sometimes like art is just, once you put it out there, like people will take it. Like I'm sure there are plenty of other cases of like art being, I guess Fight Club is a great example of like art being put out to say one thing, or like to mean one thing, and then it's totally like taken to mean something else, and people are making their own fight clubs, and there's this whole bro culture around it, right? I, as an American and a human being, I'm not a fan of censorship. Usually censorship has been used to attack the left anyway. Right.
Like Beloved.
Yes.
Like, which is like, I don't know, censoring Beloved is just like the most, I don't know, you really have to just like reevaluate what you think is essential in the now, if you think Beloved needs to be censored. But sorry.
No, you're right. Thank you for adding that. I guess it's hard because like we want to create like a safer space for people to exist in this very complicated, diverse country. And so like, I would consider non-black people saying the N-word hate speech, or like calling somebody that, right? Reading it in a book that's we can get into that another time, but but like I would consider that hate speech. And but also, like, can we legislate? Like, can we say, like, it is illegal for you to say this word? I don't know, maybe in certain institutions. Ultimately, I'm against censorship. I think that sometimes things are made and they're put out there, and ideas can be dangerous, and they just go out there and start spreading like viruses, and that's just something we have to, like, get. I don't know. I think the best armor and prevention would just be education, and like, I think it's important to make students engage with art written or created by artists from different backgrounds, so that they can learn that empathy at a young age. I wouldn't call that indoctrination, Ron DeSantis. I would just call that, like, the reason why we have education. It's like to teach kids moral values and how to think. So your question was, because I went off on a tangent again.
I forgot. But but I mean, first
censorship, right?
Yeah, but first off, I think the U.S. government agrees with you, because you're not allowed to censor things. At least not, like, you're not allowed to completely forbid access to something that may be deemed problematic, which is already, like, a broad term that's totally subjective, but that's besides the point. I think when something like, I don't know, this is a really extreme example, but like Mein Kampf, right? Like, yes, you can read it. You could go to a library and be like, hey, I want to read this book, and you could check it out. Like, whether or not, like, you want to do that for your own reasons, like, that's where that's a really extreme example, but I think it's more like, the reason why that is, like, available though is because once you start to give it a taboo and you start to, like, mystify it in the sense of, like, oh no, this is wrong, then people are like, whoa, I want to read why it's wrong. And then that's when ideas become dangerous. So that's true. I think with, like, censorship, people, like, automatically assume it's a matter of holding up values. It's like, it's not really that, because values could be, like, I mean, they're always constantly changing. What the United States considers their own values is constantly changing. I mean, I think I was reading about I think it's a bill trying to go through in Massachusetts right now about how there's so many terms of the R word in just laws, like, that doesn't even have anything to do with, like, people who have, like, who are either, like, neurodivergent or or have some form of mental disorder, and it's just because of how commonplace that word is. It's in so many laws, so they're trying to pass a bill of making sure to remove that word and replacing it with something that's appropriate, whether it's the right term of referring to those people or just completely getting rid of it in a bill or a law that has nothing to do with it in the first place. It's not about trying to remove that history or trying to remove that did happen, because it's important that people know that happened. I mean, and it goes to, like, things like Confederate statues, right? But it's not total censorship. It's more or less just, I mean, context, right? Just like knowing what the context is and knowing why this is the way it is. And I think people really forget that, especially with separating, like, the art from the artist. Like, okay, well, what is the context of them saying that? Because, like, yes, Virginia Woolf expressed anti-Semitic beliefs. At the same time, back then, it was not common, but it wasn't unheard of to say things like that. And she also married a Jewish man, so there's, like, different there's levels of complexities to it as well. Not everyone is perfect. So it's more or less, when you come to censoring, I think I'm answering my own question at this point, but, like, when it comes to censoring, it's a matter of, just look at it from the right context, and don't, I don't don't know, really consider checking out Mein Kampf reconsider before you actually check it out, because I don't think you want to do that, because you're probably gonna end up on a list anyway. But yeah, like look at it from the right angle and look at it from the right context before, I don't know, being upset over it. Yeah. Which, I mean, I think that's what why people talk about this anyway, right? Is because they get upset over it. Yeah. I don't know. Do you think you have you ever gotten upset over like something like that?
Totally. Right now I'm reading The Sun Also Rises, and I was listening to an audiobook while I was like doing my laundry, and I got to this part of a chapter where like this character is talking about a black man that they like met up with, and they were like telling the story, and they kept calling him the N-word, and this reader on this audiobook was just kept saying the N-word, you know, hard R, just over and over again. And it was just like I was just listening to this white guy say the N-word over and over again, while I was just trying to put away my laundry and like listen to a story. So I was upset by that, and it's not that I don't like The Sun Also Rises anymore or whatever. Like, I think it's a good book, and I think Ernest Hemingway is a good writer, but he's not my idol, and none of these people can be, because we know what like Hemingway's politics were. And you know, even if back in the day that's how people talked, not everybody did, and it still says something about their willingness to be, you know, just like, even just to like be a sheep like that, you know, like why I don't know, who am I to say? I wasn't alive back then, but it seems like, I think Hemingway was like pretty racist anyway, but yeah, I mean, also like I'm not black, and so it's different for everybody and how they like engage with art, but for me, throughout my life, I have engaged with plenty of art that's dominated by white people, and a lot of stereotypes of my own people, a lot of them perpetuated by my own people, you know, like brown, Desi people. So I've had to make that decision constantly to like recognize where the problems are, but also like what I like about it. And so I forgot your question again, because I just have I ever been upset? Yes, I was very upset. I turned it off, and then I just read the chapter instead.
I mean, I think it's a rhetorical question, because like of course we've been upset. Like the example for me that comes to mind is like I like Orson Welles movies. Like I like a good like share of them, and I think, you know, they're well made, and which is why like I remember watching I think it's called Touch of Evil, and I was really excited to watch it because a lot of people will say, oh, it's like this like unseen masterpiece, and it's really great, and the camera moves, woo. But like I remember watching it, and it's about just like to really like briefly explain, it takes place on the U.S. Mexico border, and the main character is a Mexican man, and he's a detective trying to solve like the kind of like who did this explosion and who's behind all these crimes. But watching it, I was just pissed off because it was a white actor with brown face, just straight up taking like the only hero Latino character in the story, and it's given to a white man, and then all the actual Latino actors are the villains, or they're just like poor townspeople who are just like can barely even speak English. And it's such like I remember being so pissed off, and I was like, I don't even want to give this movie like the benefit of the doubt. I just hate it. Like I don't want to watch this anymore. But I think watching it, I had afterwards, I was like, okay, well, let me like think, like this is just common. I shouldn't expect this art from made almost 100 years ago to like live up to the same expectations that I have for like art now, which, mind you, it's not like we're getting like that right, you know, we're getting the we're you know, making the wrongdoings from back then like right, you know, like we're not, like you're still seeing like Latino actors being like constantly marginalized or pushed to the side, but Like, I still had to be like, okay, well, back then there was no way they were going to hire like an actual Latino actor in the main character who was the hero of the story. So I should just like accept it for what it is and just like move on. And I think with separating the art from the artist, it's so much of reactionary, like right off the moment of realizing what this person did. Like, yes, I love David Bowie, but you also have to realize like, okay, well, he had a lot of groupies, and there was a lot of shit back then that you can't just ignore. Yeah. But you also, you know, and I mean, it goes back to like, he's dead. So, I mean, listening to his music, it's not like it's gonna do anything. Yeah. I remember getting into an argument about someone about that where they're talking about John Lennon, and I was like, well, he's also dead. So like, it's fine. Like, you don't have to stress out too much about it, but you know, still realize it and still keep it in mind when you're enjoying it. So then when, you know, when someone does that again, like a Kanye, or I don't know, there's so many different artists that are problematic now, but like when someone repeats that behavior, you could look at it and be like, well, I don't know about that, maybe it's not good to support this person. So yeah, I guess on that note, is there anything like about separating the art from the artist that you kind of want to touch on real quick, or do you think this is going on long enough?
I just want to say it's not absolute. People are complex, and art is made by artists, so they're all tied in together, and it's just how are we gonna live with our dark history? How do we reckon with it?
Just suck it, we ball. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's really no really easy answer, but yeah, I mean, I'm still like thinking about like how you separate it as like, is it an absolute or is it an attitude? And yeah, I mean, you could argue that everything is an attitude, like just because it's human, because we're talking about humans, we're not talking about robots or anything like that. Everything is based on attitude, but especially when we try holding up our values, it's like, okay, well, we also need to think of, you know, what will our values look like to people in the future? Like, are we in the wrong? Like, maybe this whole conversation is going to be really outdated, and maybe we're just sounding like the biggest bigots in the world, you know? But you never know. So
that's a really great point.
So I mean, maybe it's just like, you know, maybe what all we could do is just like, you know, hold on to your copy of College Dropout and then just, you know, play it until the end of time. I don't know.
Yes, or look for more artists. There's plenty out there.
Yeah, you don't have to listen to just Kanye. You could listen
College Dropout is amazing.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Yeah, I like Late Registration too. Yeah, but
I love Late Registration more.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, but
it's a coping mechanism. Art from the artist.
That's besides the point. Yeah, it is. It is a coping mechanism. It's totally just, you know, don't get too caught up in your own feelings about art, because at the end of the day, it's not that big a deal. Like, no one is gonna care as much about your little book as you are, and so, you know, maybe if you're starting to feel riled up on, you know, just like feeling like, no, like, you know, fuck the system, fuck the history, this is wrong, maybe you should just like put it down and go outside and be like, okay, I should just calm down.
Yeah, and then maybe make your own art about it.
Yeah, you could do that. That's basically like, I mean, isn't like most literature just people riffing off of Shakespeare and the Bible anyway?
Yeah, true.
So like, you know, just do your own thing, and I think it should be fine. But yeah, I think we're gonna stop it there, because honestly, I don't know if I could endure hearing my ramblings anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
But this was great. I really liked this conversation, and I hope you guys did too, whether you're listening or you're watching this. And yeah, this was a great episode. Thank you for joining me. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And next episode is going to be really exciting. I'm not going to say what it is yet, because I want it to be, I mean, not that it really matters if it's a surprise or not, but like, I'm going to make it a surprise anyway, because I don't know, that I'm feeling more gift giving now. But I guess to clue in on what it is, it's an interview. It's our first interview, so it's not going to be just me just rambling. It's going to be a little bit more formal. But yeah, it should be fun, and I hope you all look forward to that. And thank you again for listening. Thank you again for joining. And that's going to be it for this episode. So yeah, thank you all. Bye.
Peace.